Okay, folks, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Loss Prevention and Safety Services webinar series presented by Protective Insurance Company. Today, we will be discussing driver qualification best practices. My name is Todd Carrier with Protective Insurance, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. So the agenda today is, first of all, we want you to understand the best practices that are involved with driver qualifications. We want to provide some ideas for enhancing these processes for you as a motor carrier or as an agent working with your customers. And ultimately, the goal is to improve retention, safety, production, and profit at your organizations. Let's start with a little bit about Protective. Protective Insurance is a financially strong company that specializes in trucking and workers' compensation coverages. We actually started in 1930 as a broker, Baldwin & Lyons, and then in 1954 started an actual insurance company, Protective Insurance, for trucking and workers' compensation coverages. We pioneered the use of the self-insured retention program for the transportation industry, but most recently, we realigned from a direct sales model to a retail agency distribution model in 2015, and then rebranded as Protective Insurance in 2017. A couple other important items of note. For over 42 years, we've been ranked A+ by AM Best, and we are a top 3 writer of commercial for-hire trucking fleets with over 250 vehicles. We're big on relationships. Many customers have been with us for over 20 years, and we have a 95% retention rate. That's something we're very proud of. A little bit about our sales folks, our client executives. These are the folks that are assigned to work with your agencies on the business that we're receiving. Hopefully you recognize one of those folks. If you want more information about future training sessions, you would contact your client executive with those questions. For today, our Loss Prevention and Safety Services team is going to be running this webinar, and that core staff has over 21 years of combined experience. And these specialists maintain leadership roles in many safety industry organizations. They provide best practice guidance on both motor vehicle and worker safety injury reduction strategy. And essentially, their goal is to make companies safer and more profitable through risk management and compliance assistance. So we're very happy to have such a technically sound and great customer feedback loss prevention and safety team. And these folks are available to you at any time, so feel free to contact us. So I'm going to turn it over now to our main speaker, Mike Bruce, who's going to talk about the driver qualifications best practices. So Mike, you're on the audio, and I'm going to turn the presenter over to you right now. It's yours, Mike.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate that. And good afternoon, everyone. First thing we're going to cover, some items, are the driver qualifications. And the first start is initial items that we want to cover in this presentation are establishing or improving guidelines that you have in place, pre-employment processes, procedures, initial training, driver qualification file, and post-hire processes. Now, establishing or improving guidelines, first thing we want to talk about is the written job description. The biggest thing about this is we want to ensure the driver understands what's expected of them. So you can see some of those requirements and items that you want to cover. Region of country may be a factor, type of dispatching, things like that. Basically, you want to ensure the driver does not leave unexpectedly for a job that they're not quite qualified for or not expecting some items. I've even heard of carriers using videos, videoing a day in the life of their driver to help convey what is expected of them. Now, our minimum hiring standards, that's something we want to have in place. And as a guideline, here's Protective Insurance's minimum guidelines. For a motor carrier, 21 years of age, and for a public transportation company like a bus or limo or school bus, 24 years of age. 1 year of experience in similar vehicle, 3 years of experience in a public transportation setting. Of course, they must have the CDL with proper endorsements, and then no suspensions or revocations of license for over 30 days in the last 36 months. And when we're talking about violations, I want to make sure everybody understands this. Is, whenever you have a violation, we consider all violations in personal or commercial. So any of these items right here, I won't go through each one of them, but you can see several of them. Of course, driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs is very important. Refusals, and on down through the line there. And down below, there's a reckless driving or careless driving. For each careless driving, we look at those independently. Some states hand them out differently, so we take those into account and try to find out the root cause of those. So those are all our serious violations. Some other items, no more than 4 motor vehicle convicted violations in the last 36 months. And for a public transportation company, we lower that down to 3. And normally we look at 2 equipment violations equaling 1 moving violation. No more than 2 at-fault accidents in the last 36 months. And the last 2 down below bullet points are combination of at-fault accidents and moving violations. And again, as you can tell, with public transportation, we do lower that moving violation number. Some additional items for public transportation companies. No more than 1 serious moving violation, and it's defined by FMCSA 383.51 in the past 36 months. And you can see those down below. The big ones are, of course, texting while driving, handheld mobile device, definitely something you want to be aware of and keep track of those. And then also for a public transportation company, no conviction or involvement in a collision while operating a motor vehicle that involves negligent acts resulting in the injury of occupants or passengers. So that's another big one for the public transportation side. Another item that you can develop or improve is the driver qualification checklist. Basically, this is used to ensure that something's not overlooked or skipped during the orientation process. Make sure everybody, starts off in the same fashion, same way, and then also serves as an at-a-glance audit of the driver files. Applications. So some ongoing things after pre-employment would be the application. And this lists out a lot of things, and these are from the actual FMCSA guidelines and 391.21. One thing I wanted to point out is we do have partnerships and vendors that allow a discounted rates for protective insurance customers. So for example, there's First Advantage. They allow carriers to keep up with completed applications, DOT physicals, MVRs, several things. So there's other assistance out there that can be a good resource to use. So they fill out the application and then want to pull up a motor vehicle record, MVR. So it must be ordered at time of hire, and then at least once a year for the annual review, and 15 days after obtaining a new DOT physical. And a good practice in our guidelines is following a DOT accident. So if an accident occurs, you want to make sure you know exactly what's on their MVR in case anything comes up. Pre-employment screening program, PSP, commonly known as PSP from the FMCSA. It gives you 3 years of roadside inspection, including warnings. So MVR gives you all the convictions and violations, things like that, but this gives you the roadside inspection, including warnings, and also 5 years worth of DOT action. So you can use this in conjunction with your MVR to kind of look at the whole history of the driver and look at their at-risk behaviors, and or even good things like clean roadside inspections. So take all that into account. It normally costs roughly $10 per copy, and there's the website. You can look it up and pull it up and find out more information. But FMCSA did indicate on their website that carriers that use a PSP when they're hiring drivers lowered their crash rate on average by 8% and also reduced driver out of service rate by 17%. Another item when you're hiring drivers, you have to complete the 3 years of previous employer check. And, of course, drivers must consent to obtaining the previous drug and alcohol information, keep that on file, and they can review that if they ever wanted to, if they wanted to look at it. This must be completed within 30 days of hire. And At least 3 attempts must be made and document each attempt in case somebody doesn't send something back, but always document it. And for whatever reason, a file doesn't get completed in 30 days, keep on trying to finish it. It shows good faith effort to FMCSA if they do a compliance review, and it shows that you attempted to be compliant with the regulations. DOT physicals. Ideally, every new driver would receive a new DOT physical, but protective insurance does allow acceptance of a DOT physical conducted in the last 90 days. But always, whenever you accept a DOT physical, ensure the medical examiner is checked against the National Registry of Medical Examiners on the website. Now, if you do accept DOT physicals older than that, the big concern is something may have came up. They may be on a 2-year physical, it's been a year and a half, and may have the high blood pressure now, sleep apnea, something like that. So that's the concern with the accepting one without getting a newer one. Controlled substance and alcohol, very important. Extremely important to make sure this is done properly. FMCSA takes it very seriously with the acute violations, fines, different things like that. So you want to make sure this is handled properly. So we have the pre-employment. So before you hire a driver, you must get a pre-employment test and make sure you have the results back. Some carriers are even requiring hair follicle testing, and some companies, shippers, are requiring that as well. So that's another new item in place there. But they always have to be done at the same time right now. Random drug and alcohol. All drivers must be enrolled. You have a 25% for the controlled substance, 10% for the alcohol. Some smaller carriers may use a consortium even. That's all right. And then post-accident. So there's several reasons why you have to do that. If an DOT accident occurs and the driver is cited or a fatality has occurred, the drug test must be completed within 32 hours, and it must be a urine. We've had drivers in the past where they get a blood test or whatever it is, but it has to be follow the FMCSA standards. And then alcohol test. That must be completed within 2 hours. And if not, then you have to document why. And then within 8 hours. And if it can't be done within 8 hours, go ahead and document why. So stop after 8 on the alcohol and 32 after the on the drug test. Some items on initial training when you're first hiring a driver. Road test. Very important to do a road test. Believe very heavily in this. Even though a driver may have some experience, may have several years of experience over the road or whatever the same type of vehicle, they may have some bad habits. So you want to make sure you take them on a road test, include, 2 lanes, highways, right turns, left turns, intersections. Backing is very important. That's one of the number one accidents we see most frequent, and railroad crossings are all possible. And include pre and post trip inspections, very important to do those and know how to do those. And for a public transportation company, some other items they have to do is safe unloading and loading of passengers and evacuation drills. Physical fitness test. Now, there's no requirement for this as far as DOT or FMCSA, but it is a good thing to have in place. Basically, what you can do is review your job functions and develop requirements for lifting, standing, climbing, other job requirements, and also make sure you have the right equipment in place and personal protective items. That way, the driver can ensure they can handle the job, required job functions, and be a successful driver for you. Orientation. So educate the driver in all the areas you want them to cover. A lot of them are, accident scene preparedness, defensive driving, your company operations, your policy procedures, all those things, very important. But also another item is Truckers Against Trafficking, TAT training. It's actually required now in some states, but it's hard to believe in this day and age that there's still issues with that. People using other people for, sex slaves or slaves for working. So it's a great program in place and allows the driver to know what's going on and what to do in it if they see a situation like that. Another thing with orientation, like I mentioned about the road test, is don't assume drivers know what they need to do prior to them driving for you. Even though they may have prior experience, still need to ensure they understand what you expect of them and exactly what they need to do. and incorporate different ways of learning, such as writing, visual, hands-on. All those things come into play. Everybody learns differently, so it's good to look at those. And we even have partnerships with J.J. Keller, Vertical Alliance, and Impact Training, some of those things. So that always helps in orientation. And also, if you have time, definitely take time to address the orientation, and if at all possible, interview the drivers. Always want to make it personal, try to get that relationship built, but also remember that to direct them to PSP reports, remind them about that. That follows the driver from carrier to carrier to carrier, so they can see that information. Also, accidents, friends, family, and loved ones are on the highway, so their friends, family, and loved ones, mine, everybody's. So you want to make that sure they understand it's very important how they act and behave on the highways. And always, like any program you have in place, evaluate and update as needed. Written test. Again, include items that maybe it's a frequently asked question after they get out of orientation. Ask other departments for input, like operations, payroll, whatever it is. And then you try to develop something so you can give the drivers a leg up before they head out and get that first dispatch, and it gives them information that they can use in case of something unexpected happens, or they know what to do in certain situations. And always keep that in your file, personal file. Entry-level driver training. Of course, with the driver shortage, a lot of drivers and a lot of carriers are coming out of the truck driving schools. So you want to have something in place to handle that. For trainers, it's very important to have the right person being a trainer. So you may specify requirements for them, such as have a year experience or even 4 years experience, whatever it is. Just have some requirements for the trainers to ensure you have the right person in place. And then, incentives, bonuses, additional pay, whatever it is, because it's tough to be a trainer. I've been involved a long time with the transportation industry, and they're in there and spend a lot of time with that person. And also, it's very important to include sexual harassment, workplace violence education, things like that, to give the trainer information and education so they can be successful in performing their work and job. And for the students, of course, ensuring they have everything in place before they go out solo. So for a trainer and student to be together, recommend to be solo dispatching and 240 hours. And if it's a new student, straight out of you're the first carrier, you need to ensure they include education pertaining to driver qualifications, hours of service, driver wellness, and whistleblower protection. So those are all FMCSA requirements. Now for the driver qualification file, FMCSA they require certain items to be kept in place. So you have to keep the application, the road test, MVR at the time of hire, the one you pulled 15 days after the physical, and at least annually with the certificate of violation. Of course, keep the DOT physical, and any specific items down there below. These documents must be kept in the driver qualification file for the entire driver employment and 3 years after it ends. So you have to keep it as long as the driver's employed for you and 3 years afterwards. And then there's certain ones down here that you can actually remove after 3 years. So you can see those down below. Some other items you possibly could keep in the driver qualification are previous employer inquiries, the background checks, work history, copy of both the front and back of the CDL. Drug and alcohol tests could be kept there or other place, but you definitely have to keep 1 year for negatives and 5 for positive. And there's several other things. You have to keep the annual summaries and things like that. There's a lot of documentation involved with that. Signed certificates, knowledge and receipt and understanding of controlled substance program. Got to keep that. Evidence of safety training. A lot of carriers use the FMCSA book, so they get in the regulations so they can look things up and know what they are. And if you're going to use the PSP, you have to use a consent form and keep that for at least 3 years. And for a new driver, you have to take the total time on duty for the preceding 7 days, so you have the hours of service covered. And again, like the other documents, if something's not found or is missing, it's possible to recreate it, such as an application. You may use the current date and put that in there and put notes in there. Always put notes, what you found, indicating why it was lost or the date and time when you found it and everything else. This all shows good faith effort to the FMCSA if you have a compliance review. Now, once you hire a driver, there's some other processes and procedures that could make them successful. The big one, again, we talked about earlier, video training, impact training, vertical alliance, Infinity, J.J. Keller, things like that. But ensure there's a program in place that continually trains drivers. It could be a weekly or monthly meeting. I've even had with drivers on the road, I had conference calls set up a couple times a week, so people could call in and ask questions and provide them information. Also, another very important thing is to track driver behavior and retrain and document the training when needed. So drivers have a behavior, you want to at-risk behavior, you want to correct that. And we do have a vendor out there that's called, it was called Safety Box, but it's now called Idyllic Safety Suites, and that helps keep track of a lot of those items too as well. And then nowadays, video camera technology, all kinds of different safety technology. With video cameras, inward, outward facing, it eliminates all those questions with just the telematics only. So we have a partnership with Lytix DriveCam, gives special discounts to protective insurance companies. And also a good thing to not only for the driver professional, but his home life, personal life as well, is implement a wellness program. May include tips for fitness, healthy living, nutrition. So those are all areas that could help the driver be successful in the long run. All right, in summary, the insurance companies look at a lot of things. As you can see here, written standards, DOT compliance, crash rates, claims, all those things we take those into account. And I know the motor carriers want to attract safe, productive drivers that they can retain. So retention is huge. And really what we want to leave you with is utilize all your internal and external resources, including vendors, consultants, peer groups, and of course, your insurance company. And the last thing I'd like to leave you with is our protective insurance website. It lists out all the loss prevention management resources. There's different vendors in there, different ideas. We have accident, collision assistance with that. Monitoring, management resources, resource library, handouts, posters, videos, of course, and even on-site training. So there's a lot of areas of opportunity that you can look at there and see if that can assist you to be a more productive and successful company. So I appreciate your time, and now I'd like to turn it back over to Todd. Thank you.
Generally speaking, if you need to talk to someone at the sales department, if you're an agent or a producer, you can email us at sales@protectiveinsurance.com. If you're a motor carrier that would like to contact our loss prevention and safety services department directly, you can email them at lossprevention@protectiveinsurance.com. Unless you've met with someone, you can contact the LP rep